What's happening in the canine industry? For all the latest news, views, and expert opinions, stay right here for the Canine Paradigm. You'll hear from industry leaders, experts, doyens of the industry, learned colleagues, movers and shakers, and the odd randy guest. Get the latest insights and expert advice from both here and abroad from the people in the know. Now, here are your hosts, Glenn Cook and Pat Stewart. And I'm Lofty Fulton, and I'm out of here.
Glenda?
Yes.
We have to do a new ad.
We do.
It's a solemn time. Mm-hmm. Our long-time sponsor of the show, George Kittredge,
Yes.
very, very sadly passed away. And we formerly used to advertise for him his Rowdy Hound boxes.
We did.
So we don't actually know what's happened with Rowdy Hound boxes. You know anything about that?
I looked at the website. It said that they're recalibrating since their founder and boss has passed. But nonetheless, I think that you and I want to honour the memory of George Kittredge anyway. He was a friend to both of us, a hell of a good guy, and he supported us almost immediately. He was on board through and through, and I just don't want any of us to forget George. He was a terrific human being.
So we intend to continue to advertise Rowdy Hound, even though we don't know what's going on with them.
Yep.
In the hopes that they keep going, and that can be a bit of George's legacy that we're able to continue to promote.
I hope so.
In checking it out, we had a look to see, because we're not real good with the sponsorship. So we had a look to see who's actually paying for sponsorship. And we have a list of people to tell you that we support. And the first is our sugar mama, Barbara de Groot.
She's been with us from the start as well. Barbara's been an absolute staple in our...
She's a gem.
She is a gem.
She has a business.
She does. From the Heart Dog Training.
From the Heart Dog Training.
Yeah.
You can check it out. But she supports us as much and more than anybody ever has. So we appreciate you very much, Barbara. Another person who's supported us from the start.
The Einzelwiener.
Einzelwiener.
The Bullfed.
The Bullfed.
Yep.
It's where I get all my stuff.
Yeah.
It is, truly. It's where I get all my dog gear. If I need something, Jason's my first point of call. I don't use his shit website. He has a website. It's dog shit. I just message him directly. You guys probably should use his shit website, but I don't.
Yeah, because you don't want to message him directly and get his grumpy ire of the day.
Yeah, but do it. Get all your dog stuff from Jason. He's got everything you need. He's got all the shit that you need to train a dog for realty.
Everybody who comes to seminars and looks at mills and asks me mills questions, ask Jason.
Yeah.
Jason can point you in the right direction for getting the mill that's best suited for you.
I really like his leashes. I'm a big fan of his leash pack. That's why I sort of convinced him to do it. But anyway, get your stuff from Einzelwiener.
Yep.
Do you know who has a fantastic website and ships internationally?
My wife?
Your wife,
Yeah.
Canine Pharmaceuticals.
I couldn't imagine her not having a good website, how much of a perfectionist she is.
Well, the products are amazing. My dog merely being alive is a walking testimonial to that. My dog, who I've retired numerous times and has come out of retirement when I've managed to get his body back to healthy, and a big part of that is related to Canine Pharmaceuticals. So check it out, everybody.
I could say so many nice and biased things about Canine Pharmaceuticals and my wife, but what I will say is ignore me. Just look at testimonials. The testimonials speak for themselves. That's where the field trials are working. What makes Narelle's day, and mine as well, is when people are emailing in and sending messages of, well, primarily people have had no hope in the past because just everything that they were trying wasn't working, and now it is. And that is the testament that something is actually really working. And the other thing which I will add, one of the things that Narelle's told me in the past is dogs are incapable of understanding the placebo effect.
Oh, that's a good point.
So you can fake it on a human, but you can't fake it on a dog.
I never thought about that before. That's actually a really good point.
Well, my wife's actually a very smart person.
There you go.
So she's told me that humans are subject to the placebo effect where dogs are not. So it either works or it doesn't on dogs.
There you go. That makes total sense.
Yep.
There's one other person who puts a fair amount of work into this show.
Yeah.
It's me.
Yeah. Funny about that.
And I have a digital product that you can buy. If you go to my website, seriousdogbusiness.com, right now I've got 2 courses available to you. The Overview, which is a small course where you could learn how I teach.
Yep.
But the other one is the Wave Tops, which is a bigger course. It's everything I know about dog training. Well, it's not everything. It's a lot of what I know about dog training.
Yeah,
Check it
terrific.
out.
Yeah.
$500 dues. That's all it's going to cost you.
I recommend it when people are saying, what do I do? How do I get in the industry? I recommend them to your course.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks,
Yeah.
sir. All right, on with the show. Welcome back to the Canine Paradigm. I'm your host, Pat Stewart, joined today by my co-host, Glenn Cook.
Here we are again.
We're doing it. Hey, I'm going to be upfront with the listeners. I'm going to tell the truth. I'm going to hit everyone with the truth.
Have you not been telling the truth up to date?
Well, I started, since we don't get to see each other very often at the moment, I've just said that I'm with my co-host Glenn Cook, but we're not together. And people have no doubt noticed over the last few episodes that it's my turn to talk, then it's your turn to talk, because we're like two old people playing telephone. Because if we talk over each other on fucking Zoom, it cuts each other out and it doesn't work. And our whole brand is two old men talking over each other. So we have to try and get back to that. So forgive us. There might be some audio issues, but we're going to get back to talking over each other as much as we possibly can.
That reminded me of the episode of Family Guy where Peter does a cut in and he has to ring his old aunt. And he said, nobody say anything. And every time he tries to talk, she'll go, there's possums in the kitchen.
That's our show. That's us from here on out.
It is.
So you were away last week.
As were you. I think we were away on the same week, weren't we?
Yeah. We both got to actually do some real dog training for a week, which is wonderful.
Yeah, you were boot camping and I was army stuff with Red Team.
Yep. I'm happy to sort of expand on that a little bit. I do those boot camps, right? It was sort of an idea I had in 2020, if you can believe that. It was just before the world collapsed. I was like, you know what? I'm going to do a bunch of these boot camps because I was at the time traveling around doing seminars. You know, seminars are cool. I really love teaching them, but you just present the info. You can't be sure everybody's getting it at any point, right? Like, you know, you get 50 people in a room. My go with the seminar is like, you just got to present the information, you ask for questions. If people don't ask for questions, then you just have to assume that they got all the information and you keep going forward. And of course, you're leaving people behind when you do that. There's people who don't ask questions. There's things that get overlooked. And so I decided I wanted to do these boot camps where it would be much smaller groups for longer periods of time. And then I could actually look around the room and be like, did you get this? Are you aware of this? And I can ask follow-up questions and that kind of stuff. So despite the world collapsing, we still managed to get one of the many that were planned for 2020 done. And it's been a bit of a roller coaster in getting them sort of organized because they're tricky. It's a really difficult thing. And the ideal location, it's where I've done a couple of them now, is at Fabian's place in Chicago. I miss Fabian. I haven't seen him in ages, but the way that we do them there is, we live in the training center, and his training center, it's maybe the best I've ever seen in the world, but it has everything you could possibly need to train a dog to do anything, you know, including dock diving, pool, like the whole lot, right? And it's one door away from this beautiful barracks style living quarters where everybody's in these rooms and there's this beautiful commercial kitchen and living area and deck onto the Chicago River. And I live in the like penthouse at the top, but it's this incredible atmosphere. And so we've replicated that here in Australia. Kirsty organizes it for me up in Queensland, and we rent out this huge house, and it's a house on a property. There's enough room for everybody and their dogs. Everybody stays in this same house together. And it's this completely immersive experience. They're really hard to do. It's really hard to get a full week away. You know, I got 2 young kids. I got a business I got to run. And that's why I'm unable to teach anywhere near as many seminars as I would really love to, because I love traveling and I love presenting that information, but I also hate traveling and I hate being away from my family, right? And at the moment, the world is in such turmoil that I am legit scared of traveling overseas. Like I think that with everything that's going on in the world, I'm not afraid to say I'm not real keen on putting an ocean between myself and my family. I'm usually pretty happy being in Australia because I can get places. I don't care what, you're not stopping me getting home from Queensland no matter what happens, right? I'll find a way, but you are stopping me getting home from the US. Like I don't know how to sail especially well. And if everything shuts down, that would be my only option to come home. And I'm definitely not going to cross an ocean. But I love doing them. They're amazing. It's this whole live-in experience. There's 10 people plus me. Jazz comes and helps me out. It's awesome. I love it. And it's this completely immersive experience where living the dog trainer life together the whole time. And something that sort of always comes up, and it's the, we start like formal lessons at 9 o'clock each day, and we do theory all morning and then practical all afternoon. But there's really no start or end to the day. Like there's timings to be places. Like, we got to be in the classroom at 9 o'clock. But before that, we're all living in the house. We've all got our dogs. Where my dog's there. Everybody has their responsibilities that they have to have to their dogs that go for 24/7. And so we get to sort of live those out together, and you get to experience like how other people live with their dogs. And I think one of the cool things is for people who the type of people that like to come to these things are people who are fairly newish to taking training really seriously and doing cool things with their dogs. And so those people get to have a dry run, like a rehearsal of travel to a big event, right? Like travel to a trial. Is your dog going to be comfortable in the crate for those sorts of periods of times? Have you brought all of your equipment? Have you got everything that you need to be able to live out of the car? Have you rehearsed how you'll travel with the food if you're a raw feeder and all that kind of stuff? And because there's a shop just down the street, like it's easy enough to go get that stuff if you run out of stuff or if you're not as rehearsed as you thought you were. So it's a really wonderful experience. I enjoy it a lot. It's exhausting. It's one of those, as the deliverer of the information, for me, it puts me in this real tricky position where it is absolutely one of my favorite things to do is just hang out with people and talk dogs all day and assist people in understanding not just the hard skills of training, but the soft skills of understanding how this all comes together and then the fusion of all of that together over the 24/7 period. Like I love doing that, but fuck me, it's hard work, right? Like it is exhausting. And because you're kind of on all the time. And I make myself available to the people all the time, right? So from like basically I go to bed at about 10 o'clock and from sort of 6 in the morning when we're all up walking dogs and whatever, we're all sort of involved together. So my whole life gets sort of put on hold for these things, which I'm very happy to do because I can do that, but it means a lot of catch up. But the thing that is always amazing to me when we teach these things is the rituals and rhythms that people adapt to over the period of the boot camp. And so that's what's triggered me to want to talk about rituals and rhythms. But you, sir, have been doing army stuff, and I think you've had similar realizations. Is that correct?
It is, and I just want to check back.
I'm talking over you. This is my. See, we're practicing.
You did well.
All right, go ahead.
I just wanted to check back into what you were talking about before. For a very large part of my life being involved with pet resorts and canine evolution, we subcontracted the practical of the NDTF. I've been with pet resorts for like 15 years now, since I moved up from Melbourne to come and work up in Sydney and live up in Sydney and change all our lifestyle around and everything like that. All of that time, and even previous to that, like in Melbourne, I was flying up occasionally from Melbourne to come and work in Sydney to do NDTF, and I was doing it in Melbourne when I was actually working for the company. So I was, previous to working at pet resorts and being in Melbourne, I was actually working for Precise Training, the head co of the organisation. I was involved in a lot of things down there, you know, working directly with Boyd. I was working with the National Dog Trainers Federation, and we had boarding centres. We also had Australian dog training. There was a lot of things going on back then. For many of my years that I've been involved as a professional trainer, it's not just being a dog trainer. I've been largely a people trainer as well. And that's what a lot of dog trainers are. You're largely people trainers when you're educating people about how to manage and control and reshape the futures of their dogs. Let's just go back to the time in Sydney. During the years, we were doing block 1, then a block 2 later on. While that block 1 was finishing, one of the previous courses, block 2s, were starting a couple of weeks or a month later. So I was going from 1 week doing a block 1 to an older group of students that are finishing off doing their block 2. And mate, as you were saying before, it's really exciting when you get to spend all that time with people, but it's very immersive when you're in there as well. Like your life really gets put on hold and everything that you're doing has to come to a complete stop. Emails were banking up. We were running a business at the same time and we didn't have as many staff to take on those tasks. You've still got to get back to life and everything that's happened because of the 8 days of immersive training that we were doing, which was Saturday to Saturday, and being very heavily involved in it. You've then got to step back into the real world and go, oh, like I'm completely fatigued. I've had the soul sucked out of my body in a good way by all these eager minds that are learning about dog training, or they're on the other side of it where they're starting to become dog trainers. And at the end of it, like I said, you're being hollowed out. And it takes some time to get back into the rhythm of just sensible, normal life again, because you're encapsulated, you're in a sphere, you're working with these people, not around the clock, not with NDTF because I'm not living with them, but nonetheless, it was at Dural. I was living at Dural at the time. There was a lot of big ticket things happening and we were just moving in and out of that paradigm, so to speak. It was a wonderful experience. I probably feel many of the same emotions that you're feeling. Like you come off a big high, you spend time together, you have fellowship, you're watching people learning, and you're kind of the master of the ceremony at that time. So you're an important person to that group of people.
Yeah.
There's people that have got literally no experience at all. There's people that have got some experience. There's some people that are very experienced. And there's a cross section of all these different personality types that are coming in. People that are very confident, people that are not confident at all, people are learning about public speaking. But one of the things that I did find about being involved in these training courses is that you're finding out a lot of different things, not only about the people that you're working with, but also yourself, like how you work with and manage different types of people. There's some big emotions that are shared in dog training courses, and especially when you're with people for long periods of time. Not that a week is a long period of time, but
but it's enough.
It's
definitely
enough.
is enough to have that sort of understanding of. I think as well, you're spot on that when you say it, like it can be emotionally very taxing, especially as people are beginning to understand more about why their dog is acting the way that it is, and they might have had an issue with their dog. That's really always really easy to blame the dog. But then as the information starts coming out, you go like, oh, I'm doing that. That's me that's causing that. Or even, we had one example of someone that was not doing something just because they were like, well, I don't think that really affects me. That seems like a silly rule to follow. And then there's a problem with the dog. And you're like, no, you created that. You created that by doing this thing. You taught the dog the very thing that you're complaining about via the inaction of another. And that can be a confronting thing, but it can also be awesome when you're like, oh, fuck yeah, now I know exactly how to change that. Now I know exactly how to fix it.
Yeah, exactly. That's what happens as a result of staying together for that week period where you're being, use the word before, where you're being far more immersive than what you would over a seminar weekend. One of the things that I found when I've done seminars before myself, and people have said, all of this is great, but it's kind of like psychology in a can. I've got a lot of bullet points of things, but it never really transpired into like a much bigger explanation. That's one of the things that I mention always at the start of when I'm doing seminars is don't expect that this is going to answer all your questions. It's probably going to raise more of anything if you're understanding what I'm talking about. And it should, because this should get you curious about what do I do next? Where do I go? What research should I be looking at? What things on my checkbox were left unchecked? What were checked that needs further investigations? In retrospect to what I'm talking about, I remember when I was doing a course on investigations when I used to be involved in security. And the good thing about being involved in investigations and actually doing it is if you're doing it right, you'll start finding out that there's more questions that need answers. If you're progressing forward in earnest of like trying to solve what the client is paying you to solve, like it starts opening up a lot more fields of things that you should be curious about. Like, why did this happen and how did this happen? And it's not to get lost in irrelevant subject matter. What it should do is start to saying, okay, well, this is not as simple as I thought it would be. I'm not just going to find that A leads directly to B. What you'll find is, and this is just par for the course of life as well, is A never really equals B unless you just luck into it. What it does is A equals L or M or something like that. And you've got to go through some of these stepping stones to find your way there. But that's okay. That's just part of the journey. And that's an exciting part of teaching somebody or teaching a dog to learn a skill, is that you understand that all of these things happen, and the reason they happen is to prepare you for the end result and to let you learn, like, if I see this again, now I'm prepared because my mentor has walked me through it, or the lesson that I wasn't prepared for when I first started learning this has now prepared me for it for the rest of my life. And the great thing about that is when you're together during those longer periods of time, you can start to discuss this out and hash this out further, even in a group environment where everybody gets to see it, where less confident people who don't feel so encouraged or confident to ask those questions can learn along. Like they can follow along and think, oh, I wanted to ask that. I just wasn't really confident to do it. But now that person has experienced that, or I've experienced their walkthrough of the problem, now I can see it for myself of what I could do as well. The exciting thing for me too was when I was doing block 1s to block 2s. Like block 1 was more about, I'm going to teach you how to become a trainer in the basics. Like we're going to cover off a lot of learning theory. We're going to go through phases of training. We're going to go through types of conditioning that we'd be using. We're going to go through how to use shaping and chaining practices and blah, blah, blah. So we'd go through a lot of learning theory, why and how, and step it through for them. As I said before, there were people there that were experienced, people who thought, yeah, cool, I know all this. That's wonderful. But knowing it and doing it are two different things. And this is what I find with a lot of people is they say, yeah, I know this. Every seminar I go to, everyone breaks out with learning theory. Everybody talks about learning theory. That's good. And I'm glad that they do that because they need to reinforce it for some of these people, because even though they go, yeah, you ask them questions about it and say, all right, well, since you're going to learn to become an instructor, since you are going to impart this onto people when you're in training, even if you're macerating it and changing it and making it more relatable to somebody who doesn't really want to get into the real sciencey side of it, to make it understandable and, again, relatable to them and their dog or them and their training program or whatever it is. What is your interpretation of this? But more importantly, what is the correct interpretation of this? Like, what do you actually know about this? Not, yeah, I've heard this. If I reflect back to an episode you and I did called Sinister and the Silam Tau, I've got a tattoo of the Chinese symbol for Qi on my wrist, and it was always there to remind me of, don't think that you're too good for the basics. Don't be so arrogant to believe that just because you've heard someone talk about it before that you're killing it and that you don't need to revisit them, because the whole emphasis on that Silam Tau was hearing a world master in a practiced art who's been celebrated and known across the world, who sits there and says to everybody, in great delight, I might add too, that daily practice and daily reminders of the basics is how mastery is obtained. It's not being overwhelmed about it. It's just revisiting it and just remembering that that's the root ball of the tree. That's why the tree stands up. That's why the tree can grow so well. If you look at diagrams of the tree of life, the tree of life is the roots are just as important as the tree structure itself. The root, if you look at it in reverse of the ground plane, what you see above, you can't see below, but below is just as important and just as integral as what you see above as well.
Sounds like you're talking about the second Hermetic principle there, as above, so below.
Exactly.
Correspondence.
Exactly. I mean, these principles and some of these old and ancient philosophies, even modern philosophies that have been obtained through what people have done throughout life, when you're talking about the wisdom of the Arabic world, the Asian world, and then even as scholars have progressed through ancient Greece and so forth, like they've given us this philosophy for a reason. They've looked at things extensively and very deeply because it's all interconnected. And to ignore some of these things, and this is why I said, as a student with some of these things, to ignore them and say, yeah, I know, the answer to that is, well, then show me. Teach it back to me. I said all of that because in block 2 of NDTF, that's what I was able to do, is I was able to come back with the students and said, now that I've shown you in block 1, now show me. I'm going to re-hit it with you. So we're going to revise. I want to take off my hat. I want to sit down and become your student and you become my teacher. You need to teach it back to me what we learned. That's where I see big emotions starting to come out, because the student is then exposed, and not in a negative way. I don't want to say that in a way that people hear this and go, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be exposed. It's exposed for all the right reasons. It's showing them that you need to humble yourself to the fact that even though you may have heard this before and you may have read it in text before, hearing it and repeating it and knowing it and teaching it back is a different principle. And it's something It's something that I had to learn, mate, and I'm sure I speak for you and many other people who listen to this if they let their guard down and they drop their ego. Like, you have to think about this in your own experiences, because this is where I got caught out in lying about things like, what was that dog sport thing that I was... Lure coursing, yeah. I got caught out by that because I saw dogs running around after a lure. I thought, yeah, I know exactly how to train this. But when I got exposed Please enlighten us, show us how this works, talk us through the principle. That's where I was exposed as a fraud. That happens sometimes. And I guess what my message is between this extensive explanation that I'm going through, the basics are not there to rob you of any future joy. The basics are there to bolster you up, to hold you up, so you can come back to them and saying, I've experienced a line of problems in something that I'm doing. Like you're talking about rituals and rhythms as part of our subject heading. I'm experiencing a problem with the ritual that I need to go through in order to get my dog in a line of thinking of what we're doing now, like what's going to happen. And that ritual sets your dog up. Like it actually has a classical effect on the dog. Oh, yeah. Now I can see the field of what we're trying to do because the ritual has exposed me to this. And this is why we develop rituals. Like I used to do it when I was a young kid and I was competing in martial arts and so forth. My trainer used to get me involved in doing a ritual because he needed me to get into a fighter's mindset. He needed me to forget about being nervous and forget about the crowd and so forth, and just get into a focused pattern of thinking to follow his instructions. Because your coach is calling things out from the sideline, and if you can't hear him, you're lost in your own world. And then you go back to fight or flight, where you literally run around the ring just panicking and breathing yourself out of breath because you can't hear what's actually going on. You've severed your connection to the mainframe. And that's what we don't want to do. We want the dog to be involved in a mindset like, yes, we've done this so many times. We've practiced the basics of this so many times. And when shit hits the fan, I don't have to think about anything else because I've been programmed into a mindset that this ritual kicks me off. What's your experience in that?
Yeah. What I want to do now is I want to define what a ritual is and sort of contrast that against the definition of a rhythm, because I think that the two play a really important role, not just in training, but in the preparation of a dog for whatever it is we're preparing it for. Now, that might be just living life with you and going to the park and doing the normal things that a dog does, or it might be all the way up to some form of like cool competition or workspace. So when we look at the definitions, right, a ritual is an intentional, symbolic action repeated consistently. That's what we're looking to do in all forms of training to bring the dog into the right mindset. It's driven by conscious intention and structure, and its purpose is to create clarity, set expectations, and shift the mental state, right? That's the idea of a ritual. To me, in dog training, the ritual is that when I start my session, whatever you do at the start of that session is ritualized. So it's that when it starts, the dog then goes, exactly as you pointed out, classical conditioning kicks in and the dog then goes, all right, well, we have begun the ritual, and the ritual is always seen all the way through. And it can make doing uncomfortable things more comfortable or at least predictable. So I always think about this in terms of when I was training with kettlebells like all the time because I really wanted to achieve that particular thing. It was a workout called Simple and Sinister, and it's just kettlebell swings and it's just Turkish get-ups in time. But there's a prescribed warm-up, and the warm-up it's exactly the same every time, the same number of reps, the same number of things. And initially when I started doing it, you get bored, right? Because the same workout, every day for years. And initially you're sort of like, oh my God, this same shit over and over again. But then what I found was that the first thing you do is a goblet squat, which is where you pick up a kettlebell, you hold it in front of you by the horns of the bell, and you squat and you force your elbows into your knees and you pry open your hips because you're about to do 100 kettlebell swings. You need to open up your hips. And what I found was by the third one of them, I felt as though there was no escape from the workout. Right. So like you're going to do 3 sets of them, and then there's like a bridging, and then there's halos, which is like bringing a kettlebell around your head. And then you do 3 sets of 3 of each of those. And so by the third goblet squat on the very first set, in my mind, I was like, oh, this is all I'm doing. No matter what I had come from, no matter what the plan was afterwards, even if there was a time crunch to get through the workout, no matter what the interference was, no matter where I was doing the workout, it could be in my garage, it could be in the gym, it could be in the park, it could be anywhere. By the third goblet squat, I was like, oh, all I'm doing is this workout. I'm into the ritual of doing it. And I think that's the beauty of ritualizing as many things as we can when we're in training, is that it's you saying to the dog, once we begin this is how it's just going to go. It goes the same every time. This is intentional, symbolic actions repeated consistently. That's what a ritual is. And so we ritualize the process of many things so that I think ritualization in the learning phase of things means that you become predictable. You become the picture that the dog then, who's just trying to find its advantage, can find that advantage really easily because there's a predictability to what we do. Now, even if in the session, we're training different things, we're going different places, we're doing all kinds of different stuff, and training has to progress. It's not like we're static and doing the same thing over and over. Don't misinterpret a ritual as being doing the same thing over and over within the session. The ritual is how you get to the session. The ritual is how you begin the session. The ritual is the way that you set into motion something that is going to just flow on. And to hit your point, this just classical conditioning. I'm smiling and laughing the whole time you're talking about like, well, you got to understand learning theory. The thing that comes to mind when you're saying that is the difference between knowledge and understanding. I think knowledge is one of the things that you can just recite it verbatim. And I think most people who have ever gone to any kind of dog training course or have spent even 10 minutes researching it online, they'll be able to tell you, well, classical conditioning is the pairing of two signals. Signal one is a strong signal with an old function, a known function. Signal two is a new signal with no function. The pairing of those together, one before the other, creates a conditioned response. Cool. And then we talk about, oh, well, do you know what operant conditioning is? And they go, yeah. Positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive punishment, negative punishment. Positive means add, negative means minus. Reinforcement is to increase frequency or likelihood of. Punishment is decrease frequency or likelihood of. And then they give you this big thumbs up. They're like, got it, move on. And you're like, no, that's all we're doing. That's all we're doing. We're going to bring in some mythology. We're going to understand like what is a dog and what are the innate desires of a dog. So then we can add another dimension to our training. We'll talk about drives and drive expression and all that kind of stuff and just the innate desires of what makes this dog a dog and not a wolf and not a rabbit. Like what's the difference between that? But that's all there is. That's all there is, right? There's nothing else to actually know. When you understand all of that and you bring it all together, then it's just the same shit over and over, but you got to learn, okay, but how do I apply it here? Like what is actually going on here and what patterns am I forming by accident? Like that's one of the things that I think when we then go into the detail of classical conditioning as we're teaching, when people then start to realize like, oh, fuck, I've created a pattern there. I've created a ritual that doesn't serve. That actually is setting me in the wrong direction. And so that's why I really like to zoom out from this stuff and go, okay, let's set rituals and let's be intentional with how they happen. And exactly as you say, Glenn, like it doesn't matter what you're looking to do, whether it's martial arts or working out or fucking studying, like reading books, it doesn't matter. Anywhere that a skill is happening at a really high level, it always involves a level of discipline. And that discipline is always around the rituals involved in it, right? Like think about that in any time that you go to any kind of martial arts school. It doesn't fucking matter. You go to any one of them, anywhere where there's a high level of mastery, there are rituals that will begin the session. Now, what happens in the session, who knows, right? Like, what are we going to learn? What are we going to train? What are we going to work on? But there is a ritual that starts it. And what that does is create a window. It creates a space where you're like, okay, I know where the fuck my focus lies now. And because I have begun this process, I'm going to fall into the rest of the line. Like the sequence is going to happen. And we see this, we feel this when we go to, like if you're new to a group, this would be recently for you when you started jiu-jitsu, like 7-8 years ago, something like that, right? You've got a history in martial arts, but when you turn up, you're like, okay, fuck, like what's happening here? And you can figure it out real quick because everyone else is doing it. It's ritualized. You can go to church, right? You can go to any church in the world of any religion, and within a couple of goings, you're going to know what's going on and when to stand and when to kneel and when to say the things back because it's all ritualized. It's all just like fallen into place. You do the same thing over and over and over so that when one thing happens, you don't need to think. Everything else just falls into place and you find yourself in the right mindset, in the right arousal state, in the right whatever it is that is going to serve you for the thing that's going to follow. Because the people who are good at this shit know there has to be ritualization around it.
Mate, that was a very well explained example of what I was actually thinking in my head at the time when I was talking about it. And using the example of martial arts, I remember one of my coaches, it's a very long time ago now when I was a young fella. One of my colleagues who I was training with and was a very good friend of mine, he was better at it than me. And I used to be very envious of that. I used to look at it and think, why is he getting the accolades? Why is he getting the sensei's approval over me? Aren't I working just as hard? And I asked my sensei one day, what is it that I'm not doing or should be doing better? And he said, I'm glad you asked me, mate, because I think we're long overdue for a talk. The answer to my question was, I was contemplating the future where my colleague was contemplating the present. He was in the there and now, and he was invested in what he was doing, where I was thinking about, like, when I do this, I'm going to be that. I've endured this problem for most of my life where I keep fantasizing about what's going to happen in the future, like projecting forward without actually doing the work that I need to do. And when I do the work, I experience a better future when I'm actually invested in the here and now. Yoda says it to Luke in The Empire Strikes Back when he's going out to do his Jedi training. Even if you don't like Star Wars, it's incredible, the message. When Yoda is trying to educate him on, you need to be centered, you need to be thinking about the training that you need to do now. Like, this is a very important role of who you need to become in forming your rituals and your understandings of what you need to do in order to become a far better version of yourself. So when I see people that I feel are very impulsive when they're students and they just want to gloss through everything to get to the pretty stuff, I said, you'll never achieve it the way that you're going there. Like, you'll achieve a version of it that you'll be disappointed at. You'll get there and you'll think, my vase has cracks in it. And it's just, it doesn't look as beautiful as what I imagined it could be. And that's because you just haven't really set up the foundations that you really needed to establish. And we've talked a lot about that over the years that you and me have been bantering backwards and forwards about how important it is to really establish these ritualistic foundations, because we are talking about rituals as the topic now, but foundations play such a fucking integral role in who we're going to become, what we're going to become, the skills that we need to do. I think it was George Patton, or it even comes from Spartan ethos, that says those who sweat more in training bleed less in war. Mm-hmm. The reason that ethos is being spouted and it's been carried through time is because if you look at that, the message that's trying to be conveyed there is training is so important. Understanding of what you need to become for those that, let's say it's that 15 minutes of fame that you're going to receive. You suddenly became famous 30 years in the making. It was all of the grounding, all of that impressive, all of that impressive things that you did in those 15 minutes. You became that because of the history that you've had in building that, in building good structures, in having disciplines, or you're just incredibly fucking lucky, just incredibly lucky. But I've seen written in the past, and mentors have said it to me, and I've heard it echoed through chats that I've had with people. Success is often when luck and opportunity collide. And I would combine preparation in there as well, some form of preparation, because that's really where I want to seed into this and continue this conversation on rituals. And interestingly enough, we're talking about rhythm as well. Did you know that rhythm is a dancer? It's a soul's companion. You can find it everywhere.
Well, yes, I'm aware of that. However, the actual definition of rhythm, the natural or structured pattern in time and behavior. Okay. And so the purpose of rhythms is to provide predictability, manage arousal, and promote balance. Okay. What I think is really interesting is we say rituals and rhythms sort of all the time. I do anyway. I first heard this. I was at a marketing conference one time, and it was this email marketing expert. She was in front of the group, and it was when I was working for Matt at Sales Sniper, and she talked about the importance of her rituals and her rhythms. And I was like, oh my God, I love that, right? Like, it was this really good presentation, but the importance of the rituals and the rhythms. But she didn't separate them. And it took me a while to really understand that, is that rituals are the micro and rhythms are the macro, right? Like, rhythms are the overarching picture. And everybody knows it now. If you listen, you know I'm obsessed with Hermetic principles. And the fourth Hermetic principle is rhythm, right? So it means that everything moves in cycles. Some of those cycles are nice and small and you can see them. You go through the same sort of cycles, within hour to hour, you might be going through full rhythm cycles. But also some cycles are so big you don't necessarily identify them, but they're everywhere. Like everything moves in rhythms. And sometimes the rhythm is too big. You only experience this. You don't get to see the full loop. So you don't identify that it's coming, but it's there. There's always a rhythm to everything. But that's the bigger picture. The ritual is what will get you through the micro. And what I observe is like sometimes, like say when we go taking a dog into competition, it can go really badly for many people. You see people who train really well. They go to club, it all goes really nicely. They train in their own environment, whatever. And then they go into competition and it falls apart. And it's usually because they are in a beautiful rhythm, right? Like when they're training, there's a rhythm to what they're doing. And the dog knows, okay, well, it's Monday night. We're going to club. And at club, we do these things. And it's Thursday night. The pattern of Thursday has presented itself. Therefore, the rhythm of going to the club and doing those things is how I'm going to act. But if there's no rituals within the rhythm, then you can't change the rhythm, right? And when you go to a competition or, anything that's out of your normal cycle, there's something that you've got to ask the dog to do that's not what you normally ask the dog to do. It's not in your normal rhythm. That's where the lack of ritual will mean that things fall apart. So that's how I like to think of it, is that rituals are the micro and rhythms are the macro. And the rhythms are going to happen. You can't avoid that. There's no escaping that. You end up living your life in a rhythm. And I think that if you're not living some kind of rhythm that's identifiable, then you are. It's just that the patterns are too big. You haven't yet seen them because life, everything moves in cycles. You haven't identified it if you don't think that that's the case. But the rituals are up to you to set and to keep and to work within. And I think that every time you do that, no matter what you're looking to achieve with your dog, those rituals, those finer details, those classical conditioned responses are the things that will allow you to break a rhythm, to be able to say like, hey, the rhythm has served us to this point, but right now I need something different. And it's not within the pattern that you recognize, right? Because dogs are just pattern recognition machines. They're constantly looking for, how do I find success in this environment? How do I find success in this situation? How do I continue to live my awesome life? And they find the patterns. They start realizing like, oh, there's a rhythm to the way that we live. You get up at roughly the same time every day. We go out at roughly the same time every day. We walk, we train, we experience each other. Whatever it is that we do together, there's a rhythm to it. And most people have a daily rhythm, or you might have a weekly rhythm, or it might even be a monthly rhythm. But whatever it is, it exists and the dog will find it. But the rituals have to exist within the rhythm to be able to change the rhythm and still find success. And so it's simple stuff. The way you get the dog out of the car, ritualize that. The way that you open a session, you ritualize that. You put all these sorts of things to a predictable pattern so that the dog goes, oh, you've begun step one in the ritual. Even though this doesn't feel like the environment, this doesn't look like the place, this doesn't seem like the time that we should be doing the things that you're saying we should do, the ritual has begun and therefore it must be completed. And the dog then just falls into the new rhythm, falls into the new pattern via the action of the ritual setting that off. I think when we talk about it in terms like that, sometimes in dog training, that can be hard to sort of conceptualize when we're trying to apply this to the dog. But I assure you, when you think about this in terms of your own life and your own work, you're doing this already. It's the only way that you're successful. It's the only way that people manage to find a level and make progress is by ritualizing and finding rhythms in their life.
I watched a documentary some time ago on the musical band, the Beatles, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, John Lennon, and somebody who is more relevant to this story right now, Ringo Starr. He was the goofy looking one in the group. I think he was the less attractive one, the one that sort of really, everyone poked a bit of fun about. But it was Ringo Starr who held that band together through the rhythm of his drums. And I remember the people that did the documentary were discussing what an actual fucking genius he was, because they were talking about one of the first times they went out on tour and there were girls screaming and you could barely hear anything. And it was Ringo Starr who started the rhythm of the band being able to be held together. Like he just crashed through the night, like he sort of went 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, and he started off. And that way the whole band were able to hear the rhythm of what Ringo Starr was doing. in a musical comparison, like when you've got somebody who sets the tempo and the rhythm, they're holding everybody together. So you can develop your rituals if you like. So you can you can single yourself out. So if you're playing guitar, for example, you can sit there and play your guitar. If you're doing percussion, drums, anything like that, or if you're doing keyboards or whatever, you can practice that alone. And that can be part of a solo ritual. But you also need to integrate that ritual into the rhythm of everything so you can integrate it well and everybody knows this is the part where I come in. This is the part where I stop. And it's based on listening to how the whole band integrates and works well with each other. The same needs to be done for dog and handler teams when they're working together, or just as you mentioned before, when people are going out and doing trial events and so forth. Everything matters and everything needs to be considered. Have I done this ritual in a different place? Like I've proofed it well here. I've developed a beautiful rhythm. I've developed a ritual of the dog understanding, but have I done it on a different field where the dog doesn't understand what this is? And what happens when something is a competing motivator? What happens to my ritual then? Is my ritual sound enough to be able to hold the dog together when something is presenting itself and then the dog looks at this and goes, hell, I haven't dealt with that before. And that's starting to sap some of the value of what we're doing and what I've been known to do with you because I've never experienced that before. And this is why I often see people's dogs aren't able to hold it together at a trial because they just haven't seen that involved in the ritual before. But if it's integrated into it, and the dog starts saying, I've seen this and I've seen that. And, like there's been animals there and there's been a decoy doing that down the field. Or, like if we're getting into detection work, this odor has been presented before and I've seen that. And, like in training, this has been part of my normal experience. So I'm able to understand and hold together the ritual. And then the rhythm comes as part of it. And it, as you said before, Pat, it integrates beautifully as well. And then this is where, like we often talk about the integration of classical and operant, how they're supposed to be like a beautiful pair of sparring partners that know when it's supposed to integrate well. You know that it should be now part of the subconscious versus the conscious learning of a species or a student we're trying to work with. And you can see that through the results of what we're actually trying to do as well.
Yeah. I think the other thing that I wanted to point out is, me and you sort of think, or I certainly speak in terms of bringing that dog to purpose, because that's the kind of training that I like to be involved in. There's a thing we're going to do, whether that's real work because, the dog is our work partner and, has to find the bombs or, apprehend the bad guy, or whether it's sport type stuff in whatever way that we are participating with our dog. That's sort of how I always frame things. It would be remiss of me not to point out the importance of rituals and rhythms with pet dogs, especially.
Well, you're doing it anyway, right? Whether you like it or not.
Yeah, exactly. Especially the more nervous or anxious type dogs. Rituals and rhythms are the antidote to that, right? Like I think a lot of the times when we see dogs that are full of anxiety, it's very often because of the lack of predictable nature of their world, right? And they have not found the patterns. They have not found the rhythm, and they're constantly in concern about how things are going to go. So to me, I think anytime I'm dealing with a dog with a level of anxiety, with that level of hypervigilance that sometimes you see come over dogs, the solution to that very often can be just rituals and rhythms. Like we are going to live this life in a particular pattern. There's going to be a strong structure to the way that everything goes for you. You're going to be able to find that pattern really easily. So therefore, you know what's coming and you can emotionally, physically, whatever, prepare yourself for whatever's coming. And when we're going to do things together, there will be a strong ritual around what we do so that you get used to the idea of we start this process and it always ends in success. And so that there's an assumption when the process begins that the end will be success. And you know that because we've seen that through. We've conditioned that response. We've created that ritual. Very often, I still interact all the time with people who have problems with their dogs where it's anxiety around, places, people, things, whether it's anxiety around separation, whether it can be all kinds of anxiety around opportunities to get to staff, opportunities to interact with other dogs, all the different things that we often just put into this blanket category of reactivity, right? Like we always end up just calling everything reactivity. Anything that's undesirable is reactivity. And so overwhelmingly, I experience that most reactivity is fixed with rituals and rhythms. Of course, we have to go into we have to get a little bit operant, like we have to start showing like, hey, don't do that or do this instead. And we have to understand what is a dog, and we have to know how drives work and make informed decisions along the way. But the overarching thing that will allow a dog to consistently find its success and allow a dog to then be like, okay, well, cool, everything pans out for me, and I can tell that it is going to because it has already begun the process, is by having rituals around what you do with that anxious dog and rhythms that the dog can identify within these patterns of its life. And the more that we stick to that, the easier it is for a dog to find its level and to then be able to make slight modifications to those rituals and rhythms and not have the dog freak out, right? It's when that you have these like a total abandonment of any ritual or any rhythm. A lot of dogs don't care. A lot of dogs are like, yeah, sweet, whatever. I'm happy, go lucky, I go with the flow. But if you have a dog that is highly anxious, that is prone to stress, that you would describe as reactive, I promise you, by implementing strong rituals and strong rhythms, those things are management, right? Like we're not saying that we're going to fix the dog, but we are absolutely going to create a better version of the dog who's now less stressed and less prone to be pacing and spinning and freaking out because it now can predict what's coming. And that's one of the things that I think is really interesting about, like a lot of the times anxiety is caused by an uncertainty about what lies ahead, uncertainty of the future, uncertainty about how could this go. The remedy to anxiety is certainty. Like that's the thing. When people are like freaking out, oh, I'm anxious about how it's going to go. I'm like, well, like put into motion the things that will make it only go one way, and your anxiety can disappear because now you have certainty, right? You mitigate, like think through, this is what planning is. Think through all of the ways that this can go wrong, right? Avoid your anxiety via planning and have actions on. If this happens, then I'm going to do this. If this happens, then I'm going to do this. I know how this is all going to unfold for me. There's nothing to be anxious about because I've thought through everything that can go wrong and I have a plan for if it's going to. I have a ritual that is put in place. When the trigger comes in, there's a ritual that goes into action, and therefore there's no need to be anxious because I know what's going on. The remedy to anxiety is more often than not just certainty, and certainty comes from rituals and rhythms.
During what you were talking about then, you kicked me into thinking about when you start to see a bit of a decay cycle happening in rituals as well. And the interesting point in that, and this is where you prompted me because you kind of talked about how a dog will readily dump a ritual if that's what it thinks is the norm, where a human will get very hung up and think, why aren't we doing the ritual? Why aren't we doing this? And they can actually develop anxiety around that, where the dog will think, we're not doing it? Okay, cool. Let's just get on with life. And dogs are it's one of the things I'm very impressed about it with many dogs that I've shared a life or observed in real world applications is how easy they are to dump something and move on if they think this is not part of my normal cycle anymore or it doesn't lead to the pathway. And the entire process of developing the ritual is having the dog understand this step-by-step process is the only way that you're going to get through the gate of reinforcement. Like this is what opens the final gate and you have to do it.
It's the path.
It's the path. It's the path you must walk, my friend. So don't deviate from the path because this is what the path is. And once that's explained to the dog in terms that it understands, the student understands, it's happy with that. Like it goes, oh, cool, this is what we do. So the dog, if shown correctly, is happy to take up the ritual, but it's also happy to dump it as well. And this is where people have conflict with their dog, like a true conflict with their dog, is because they go, why aren't you doing the ritual the way that I stepped it out? Well, that, my friend, is some of the observations that I've seen recently and along my career, that you start changing the terms of the ritual in different places you go. You start allowing the dog to be sloppy or to do things because you think, oh, I need to rush through this because people are watching me or I'm in a different place or the dog is acting up or it's doing this. Great. Cool. You're acting up? Big fucking deal. You're not going to get to the end. That's not how it works. I don't care that we're in a different place. This is the ritual. This is how it needs to unfold. I don't care that there's a different person there. This is the ritual. This is the way that it must be performed. The dog needs to understand through your education. And if it doesn't understand, let me step back into this realm. If it doesn't understand, that means that you have a proofing training issue. That means that you're insisting on proofing when you need to be back in training. You need to understand that the tug of war between those two phases is very real, and you must manage that. You must look at it and go, I don't have generalization. That's what I don't have. And that's why I have an erosion of my ritual in this particular field, is because I have ignored that my dog isn't truly proofed in all environments. I need to re-examine it. I need to step back into the mindset of the dog. And that's why I'm saying that we need to understand that sometimes we need to claw back at the basics and say, why am I seeing cracks in it? Why am I seeing that the dog is not doing it well? We're talking about, and have been talking about, when you've completed things and you've done your job well. But as instructors, you and I both know, mate, that this is where we start to get a lot of student questions. Like, yes, I know that I need to develop a ritual. Yes, I know that I've watched other trainers doing it and I've seen it out on the field, or I've seen it in real world application, or I know that my dog needs to be better at home. But again, they're sort of trapped in that little bit of paradigm where real world interferes with the necessity of getting their dog trained. And that's why I wanted to bring up that story before of my youth, when I wanted to be great and get the eye of my mentor, but I wasn't doing the work that I needed to do in the then and there. I needed to really focus on what that was all about in order to establish the hierarchical steps of what to do next in order to develop the ritual, and not only know it, but do it well. And that's where I think I see a real fall down in potential of people. Where I see people reach their potential is where they actually follow and step that out well. Where I see, when we're talking about cracks appearing, when I start seeing the cracks appearing, it's where I see people in a hasty mindset, or they're just defragmented in their way of thinking. Maybe they haven't been coached well. Maybe they don't understand it. Maybe they're feeling pressures. Maybe other things are more important in their life, whatever it may be. That's where we start seeing it. So you and I started this conversation on the importance of rituals and rhythms, but we also need to discuss in a little more detail what happens when you fail to follow that path. And like, the responsibility has to be taken on those who are imparting the knowledge. This is why, again, to sound like a bit of a broken record, it's very important that you know it well enough to teach it back, because you are doing that to somebody down the line somewhere. And you used an example of BJJ before when I first started that. Now, that was different to any other form that I've done. And I know I've said this story, but it warrants further discussion because I still use this when I'm using a case example. We were doing a roll, and there was a drill that our professor, some you call them sensei, some you call them mentors, some you just call them by their name. But in BJJ, it's usually the professor. So the professor in the group was relaying a skill, and he stepped it out, got a student out. He talked about it, theoretical. Then he did a practical demonstration with a student and said, this is what we need to do. This is the steps that we need to do. Right hand goes here, left hand goes here, left leg goes here, right leg goes here. This is how we do it. And then use pressure, and then you flip the other person over. He said, everyone understand? We all said, yep. And he goes, all right, let's go put it into practice. Grab a partner, blah, blah, blah. So I was training with a guy, and him and I didn't really clearly understand the steps of the practice that we were putting together. And he asked me, do you know what it is? And rather than saying, no, I need to call the professor over and I need to ask what it is, I just said, yeah, this is what I think it is. So I just went ahead and started coaching him and doing it. And the professor walks over and he kicked me in the ass and he goes, what are you doing? And I said, what you showed me. And he goes, that's not what I showed you. And I said, what am I doing wrong? So rather than insisting and being arrogant and just being a turd, I just said, what am I doing wrong? Can you show me? And he said, yep. Here's what you need to do. He goes, you've missed this entire step, and that's why it's not working, and that's why you can't do it. And I said, okay, cool. And he goes, and just one other thing, mate. If you don't know something, don't teach it. And it was a humbling experience. And I thought to myself, how many times have I needed to say that to people that I've met in life in general, and, watching them on dog training forums and so forth, talking about something that they don't really have the adequate authority or the credit in their account to be able to teach something, but nonetheless, they will still fumble through it. It's not a scorn about any one particular person. I include myself in this, and that's why I gave a real-world demonstration of something that I went to pass on that I had no knowledge on because I was a student of it myself and I was learning the skill. So why fucking teach something that I had no real concept or grasp of on how to do the actual mechanics to see it through to fruition? I see so many clients, and I've seen so many over the years, that say to me, why does my dog do this? And that's the generalized question that they ask. And I said, well, that's what you've shown them how to do, and that's what they understand. So they're resorting to either a version of what you've shown them, and it also modifies on a daily basis. So they get option A on Tuesdays, option B on Wednesdays, and option C on Thursdays, etc. So it's no wonder we see an erosion of understanding, or a complete lack of understanding, or an understanding of exactly what you've shown the dog to do, but you don't understand why it's done it because you don't even understand yourself well enough to be able to fit this all together. So this is why I'm saying to people, when you're developing the structure of a good ritual, you need to make sure that it's mapped out and a strategy is developed around it. And if you don't understand it well enough yourself, then speak to other people about it. Never let that ego get in the way of thinking I'm killing it. I'm better than everybody else. I'm getting pats on the back by people, and then wondering why does my dog break a sit when I really need them to hold a sit and I have to call them back 3 or 4 times? Why wouldn't the dog just sit there and hold the sit until they say, don't move? Like when I think about people involved in high order detection work and so forth, the reason that you don't want dogs to move or run off in situations like that, let's talk explosive detection. You don't want your dog running through a field or running through a doorway where you don't know the intentions of the bad guy on the other end of that. You don't want your dog to trip something that everybody's going to be detonated through. Or you don't want your dog rushing into an area in narcotics where a dog could be exposed to life-threatening narcotics, for example. Then the dog end up killing itself because it's ripped open a bag of fentanyl because the ritual wasn't developed enough. The dog got too rowdy, too excited. You've used a variable schedule to create too much frustration with the dog. So now the dog thinks, well, now I have to headbutt this fucking thing rather than just sit off it because I should have been locked in a continuous loop here, but now I've been locked in a variable schedule where in training I've been taught I've got to go up and smack my head in this 50 times before I'm going to get the ball thrown for me or the food unlocked or anything like that. Like my ritual here of unlocking this is to do all this crazy behavior where really I should have been locked in a behavior well and truly. So again, when you get back into that saying, those who sweat more in training bleed less in war, that's why that relevance happens to be in real world application. But even people who get so frustrated on the field of training is maybe you've taught the dog to do this because you've frustrated the dog to think this is the behavior that I need to exhibit on the field.
Mm-hmm, for sure. There's a lot to unpack in it all. For me, the key points are just know that your ritual is your condition responses. When you come out, when you're prepping your dog, your ritual is going to set into motion a sequence of events. And that's what a true classical conditioning does. There's something that sets into motion a sequence of events and everybody just goes with the flow. Those rhythms are the big overarching patterns and you're going to fall into those. So identify them and help them work for you. Got anything else to add, sir?
As you alluded to, I think it's a bigger part of a much bigger conversations. Like we've seeded in so many things about there involved in the development of and the troubleshooting section of it. But the troubleshooting section alone is a very expansive conversation, one that could be had over many meetings, many conferences, and it should be. And this is why I say to people, do not feel that you need to rush through this. It's part of the exciting journey. Once I learned to embrace it rather than to shrug it off or feel that it was handicapping me in a way, I now look at it as it's a building block and it's an exciting one because now I have something historical that I can refer back to and look back and say, all right, I've got a problem. Now I know why that problem is because historical data has proven that as part of setting up this cycle or ritual, I've done this wrong and I need to re-engineer it with the dog because now the dog has a very fragmented view of how to get to that very important end piece. The dog believed it was this. It's part of mismanagement or something that I have underrated on the importance of doing it correct.
Nice. All right. Well, that's it for another episode of the Canine Paradigm. As always, if you like what you hear, like, rate, share, subscribe. Do that through whatever subscription service you download us from, and then go somewhere else and do it there. Don't check. You can do it as many times as you want. If you've already done it in the past, you can do it again. You can do it as many times as you like.
They don't check, apparently, according to you.
Nobody checks. Nobody checks.
How do you know? What's your evidence?
I made it up. If you want to support the show, the best way to do that is to jump into Patreon. A few bucks a month gets you a giant backlog of information as well as new stuff going forward. I've actually got stuff that I've got to upload today to put into there.
Nice.
And you could spend more. You could spend $10 a month. You could get access to the live Q&A with me every month. Or if you're a particularly generous supporter and you just like the show and you want to show us love in that way, you could give as much as you want. You could buy us a Lamborghini if you really wanted to.
I'm still waiting on that.
On the Lambo. We got a Lego one.
We did get a Lego one. Yes.
Yeah. Rip built that and then immediately modified it and took it apart and turned it into a spaceship and all kinds of stuff.
Holy shit.
It's things don't last long. Once he makes stuff, like he'll make a Lego and then like, nah, this is shit. I'm going to change this and this. But then he'll cannibalize it as well. Be like, oh, I needed this part for this other thing that I'm working on, and it'll get taken apart.
He sounds like he's got a creative dilemma like his mother.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
So you could do that. You could buy us Lambos.
Yep.
You could get into spring. There's links in the show notes. You could check out the T-shirts that we have to offer, the wall tapestries, the many and various branded products that you could get with our logo and stuff on it. We probably need an update on that. We probably need a new T-shirt or something coming soon.
Yeah, I think we do. I thought you were going to get Jane to do one with like a UFO.
Yeah, she's got a new logo. She's redone the logo and just sort of modernized it because she was never really very happy with it. But I'll reopen that. I'll write that down.
New logo. Hang on, just fucking rewind for a second. Like, don't drop that fucking bomb on me and then just go, well, just moving on from there. Yeah, she redid
the logo because she was never really happy with, because, like she drew it and then Damon Jennings digitized it for us. And so it was a bit of a conglomerate of two people. But now that she can do all the digital drawing, she's redone it. I've got a picture. I've got it on the wall here. Yeah, it's the same picture. It's just like
modernized,
cartoon a little bit more. Yeah, so you can do that. And if you want to get in touch with us, best way to do that is jump in the Facebook discussion groups, an ever-going group of cool people. It's one of the last bastions of non-fuckery in the dog world on Facebook, so you could jump into there. But if you want to get in touch with us directly, you could shoot us an email. We are info@thecanineparadigm.com. Love you all. Goodbye.